John chapter 19, introduction. The crucifixion of Jesus, the death of Jesus, the burial of Jesus. All of this in this chapter. But before all of that starts, it starts off with still Pilate and basically the judgment on Jesus. Pilate found him not guilty. He heard that Jesus had to die because he's right? He called himself the Son of God, blasphemy. So he was shocked when he found that out. He went back to Jesus to ask him, and then he really tried to get Jesus out of this, mess in the sense that he created. Because he could have just told him away from the beginning, I found no guilt in this man, get out of my sight. But no, he played along with them, unluckily. And then Jesus told him about he first said, but Jesus, I can set you free or let you go. And he said, no, the power you have came from above. I mean, understandably, for him it would have meant Caesar. But ultimately we know it's from God. He tried his best, but ultimately the Jews were like, Jews in this case now, not the nation of the Jews, right, but those in opposition to Jesus, as John loved to call them. Okay, he spoke of them in that way. Not, again, I've said it so many times, not in the other way of the Jews as a nation, just those in opposition to him. Okay, and they didn't want any of that. They were willing to go so that they said, we have no king but Caesar. Crucify him. And Paul said, I don't find no guilt in this guy. Crucify him. They were going to go to the deepest depths. If in the previous chapter they went to depths to get Jesus in there, in front of Pilate, now they were willing to disown God the Father by calling Caesar their only king. That's disowning God. Okay? For them reading this later on, seeing it, this is how far they went. When after the emotions were done and gone, and they could stop and think a bit, they ought to have realized. And John is trying to put it on them. They should have realized, but ultimately, they disowned the Father here by calling Caesar their only king. Okay, so then he delivered him over to be crucified. And they took him, as we know the story, they went to this place in Aramaic called Golgotha. We will get back to the idea why it was in Aramaic called Golgotha, where he was then crucified. And there were the two thieves with him, okay? And so as well, Pilate had written up above the cross that he's the king of the Jews. And he wrote it in a number of languages, Aramaic, Latin, and Greek, so in 3 languages. And the others could see it, and the Jews complained. That is now again the leadership complained concerning this. How could you do this? Don't write that. They say that he claimed to be semantic seemingly, but Pilate was not going to have him. Right? They need to understand what they did. And it's an important thing. They had to understand. God was making sure that they understand. And John is making sure to remind his readers, you guys did this. Right? You are guilty. You had your king killed. You had him crucified. Not that he called himself, but he was. He is your king, ultimately. Yes, Pilate said, well, I've written. So they crucified, they divided the clothes. That's the prophecy. Ultimately, they decided to cast lots of who gets what. Okay, fulfillment of prophecy. There were a few women standing there, Mary, the wife of Clopas, Mary Magdalene, and his mother, as well as ultimately John, the disciple that Jesus loved, who was standing there. And then Jesus handed over responsibilities for Mary onto John, not into his other brothers. Why? Because his other brothers are going to be in Jerusalem, leaders of the church, at least James, a leader of the church there in Jerusalem. They're not going to have an easy life, but John is going to be the one with the extended life, who will live the longest and will die, the only one of them to die in his own old age, not by being massacred, basically, or persecuted for his faith. I mean, he was persecuted for his faith, but not martyred for his faith. That's the correct word to use. So that said and done, Jesus taken care of. He knew, so knowledge that he had, that they didn't have, not hidden knowledge, it will all come out to play. Right, the perfect knowledge, because it's important. And Then, okay, Jesus saying he thirsts, and then the final words, it's finished, bowing his head and dying. Now that was, like, later on they would say, I mean, that was way too fast, okay? So then his side was pierced. Why the side was pierced? Because of the day of preparation, and the leadership still wanted to play the game that we are doing it in the correct way, all right? We don't want to be defiled. And so Joseph and Nicodemus ultimately came to ask for his body, and they thought, how can he be? The Jews asked Pilate to break his bones because after they didn't want to be defiled. So breaking the bones, as we know, pushing yourself up, that's kind of how you breathe. If you don't breathe, you suffocate. For those, I will get back to the teaching part of that. And so they went to, and they came to Jesus, and it's like, he's already dead, so they didn't break his bones, ultimately as well, but they pierced his side with a spear, and out came the water and the blood, meaning ultimately that his heart wasn't functioning anymore. I mean, that's clear just from a biological standpoint. So yes, and they're bearing witness. Witness is true, okay? Witness. The signs bore witness to Jesus. The Father bore witness. The words bore witness. All these things bore witness to Jesus ultimately. And here as well, a person, another person, not John the Baptist, now it's one, and the one who saw all of this, and his testimony is true. Why? So you may believe. This belief is not based upon thin air, right? This is not just like, I can walk, like in that Indiana Jones movie, where he had to believe and walk over the chasm, kind of, okay? He had to, that is like stepping into the unknown. No, this is knowledge, this faith is based upon what someone saw and what someone then said. And they know this guy, so it's not based upon nothing. Okay, if they didn't know the guy and this guy was a liar all the time, then it would be faith based upon nothing. But we'll get back to that as well. Okay, and all of this, again, fulfillment of scripture. Why? Because it was prophesied and none of his bones will be broken. Then Joseph Arimathea came, right? And he was a disciple of Jesus in secret because of fear of the Jews. Right, he's a Jew himself, but he was a leader actually, but he's afraid of that group of Jews. That's just why it proves as well that my point, this is not speaking of all the Jews, because Joseph was a Jew. Right, so then he ought to be afraid of himself, which doesn't make any sense. So he's afraid of not the people of the Jews, but this group that's against Jesus, the majority of the leadership. So they came, and as well, Nicodemus as well came with him. Right, and he brought this myrrh and this aloes, about 75. It's a lot of it, a heck of a lot of money that he's now willing to pour out on Jesus now that Jesus is dead. Right, while he was alive, he was firstly. It shows the growth. Coming at night, then speaking out a little bit, and now when he has nothing to gain, to give so much. This was a heck of a lot of money that he was giving away to Jesus when he could not gain anything. Right, not at all. He was not looking for. He was not doing this to gain a position in anything. Okay, and then they took him. They had him buried. Nearby was this garden and this new tomb. So it's not to say it was Joseph Arimathea's tomb. It's not stated here. It's just a new tomb where no one had laid before. This is as well. We will see a fulfillment of prophecy in Isaiah. Okay, and the reason they did this, the day of preparation was at hand, the tomb was closed then, so it's just kind of logical, kind of makes sense. We can't carry him too far, and so we will just do it here. So this is basically therefore again. So it starts with the court case. A few more questions to Jesus from Pilate about authority, and then ultimately him handing him over, Jesus being crucified amongst the thieves. Right, Jesus dying, Joseph and Nicodemus coming to ask for the body, and them then burying Jesus there in the garden. Interspersed, like the handing over of the responsibilities of Mary, since Jesus is the elder son, to John, that is, and we will look at the teaching more in depth at that. That is basically what short this chapter is about. So, by the way, that's like a Dutch ship, they would fare on the seas. I remember coming from South Africa was Jan van Riebeeck, 1652, coming to the Cape of Good Hope. There's a kind of ships I've been, but not on this one. I mean, no point in going into this one. Okay, this is the kind of ships they had in those days. Again, a little bit of history, the kind of things you can see here in Melkam. And yes, all around, music, people walking, night markets. There's lots of market stalls here. So I think now it's time to stop a bit, and from here, God willing, move on to Jakarta to KL, and then back to Penang and Thailand. That's that for now.